The vacillation between Chartism, Weitling's utopian communism and Owen's peaceful, reformatory utopianism can be seen in all documents of the London Educational Society since 1844, that is, since his first appeal on September 21, 1844 in connection with the Silesian Weavers' Uprising. In this document, its authors, Schapper, Moll and other leaders of the Education Society, declare their deep sympathy for the Silesian weavers, who are in the same miserable material conditions of life as all German workers. At the same time, this appeal reveals that the leaders of the society, with their indifference to the political forms of the state, their condemnation of revolutionary violence, their lack of understanding of the embryonic forms of the class struggle of the proletariat and their adherence to the Louis Yangnan slogan organization of labor, were still firmly attached to utopian and petty bourgeois socialism. At about the same theoretical level, if not lower, are two other appeals of the Enlightenment Society, one to the leader of the German Catholic movement, Johann Rong, and the other to the French belle 300 Eugene Sue, the author of fashionable social novels. In their content, they are entirely consistent with the views of Weitling. The latter, judging by the minutes of the London Education Society, is the author of these two documents. Partially preserved minutes of the London Educational Society, extensive extracts from which were published in the Archive for the History of Socialism and the Labour Movement, provide an opportunity to understand the heated and multi-day discussions that took place in it on the most important fundamental issues of the communist worldview. The course of discussion of questions of theory in the society most fully reveals the struggle of currents and the ideological path that the Union of the Just travelled before it accepted the revolutionary ideas of scientific communism and Marxism. The minutes of the solemn meeting of the Society of February 11, 1845, dedicated to the 5-year anniversary of its founding, indicates the influences experienced by the members of the Society. The main content of the speeches of all the speakers, as indicated in the brief record of the minutes, boiled down to the following provisions: the invention of property, false religions and nationalities have brought all the misfortunes on earth, and only with the help of enlightenment it will be possible to turn the earth into a garden, and humanity into a single family. Already in this conclusion, two influences are noticeably manifested. One, coming from Weitling, and the other from Schapper, who defended the ideas of Kabe and Owen, in particular the idea shared by many French and English utopian socialists that only with the help of education it will be possible to achieve the establishment of communism. In their philosophical views, the leaders of the society shared many of the views of the French materialists and educators of the 18th century. Weitling was alien to the materialistic and atheistic worldview. At the same time, Schapper, Bauer and other leaders of the Union of the Just in London closely followed the development of German philosophy and welcomed the turn of some former left Hegelians towards communist views. Starting from 1842, said Schapper, philosophy began to speak in favor of communism. Much attention was given to meetings of the company on the methods and ways of communism. Defended by Weitling and his supporters, Krieger and Lohmann, petty experimentation, like moving to America and creating communist colonies there, met with sharp opposition in the London Education Society. Weitling constantly appealed not to reason, but to a feeling that should push people to spontaneous rebellion. The main thing he considered the agitation of immediate action, the rebellious preaching, and least of all he resorted to long and deep propaganda. Schapper, being influenced by the ideas of Kabe and Owen, was more inclined to the opinion of the need for peaceful propaganda and constantly rejected a violent revolution, which supposedly would again plunge mankind into slavery. Weitling, continuing to stand on the positions of conspiratorial egalitarian communism, tried to prove that society was already prepared to switch to communism from today to tomorrow, and Weitling again turned to the lumpen proletariat as a force capable of destroying the old society. Humanity is always ready for communism or never, Weitling said in opposition to Schapper. There is no need to prove that Weitling's view of revolution as a spontaneous act of completely desperate people has nothing to do with a scientific understanding of this issue. On the whole, Schapper enjoyed much more support in the society than Weitling, but on the question of the communist revolution, the majority, even Schapper's closest friends, G. Bauer, I. Moll, K. Fender, had to indirectly support Weitling and oppose Schapper. And Schapper himself was forced to soften his actions against the need for revolution. Bauer took a more correct position on the question of the ways of struggle at a meeting of the Society on July 6, 1845. He stated, "There is little hope of achieving anything on the path of simple peaceful enlightenment. The possessors will never make concessions if they are not pressured by great physical strength. Whiteling has already proved that nothing can be achieved without struggle, that the Enlightenment always prepares a new revolution, but cannot warn against it. Similarly, we are now in a great preparatory period in which state laws, government measures and industrial progress bring the social issue to the fore and intensify the oppression that finally pushes the whole nation towards communism. Bauer also said that only enlightened workers can bring communism to life. He had high hopes for scientists and philosophers who would come to the working class and help educate the workers for the decisive struggle to build a communist society. Thus, Bauer viewed the revolution as a necessary result of the development of industry and the intensification of economic and political oppression, but he saw the main force of the revolution in the proletariat. Neither Whiteling nor Schapper understood this. It can be assumed that this view in Bauer began to take shape under the influence of the ideas of Marx and Engels, since he had probably already read the works of Marx, and met with Engels. The debate in the London German Workers' Society led to an even greater demarcation between the direction of Whiteling and the leadership of the Enlightenment Society. The opposition of these two groups was revealed not only in fundamental questions of theory, but also in the practice of organizing and conducting propaganda. By the end of 1845, relations between Whiteling and the leaders of the Enlightenment Society took on an extremely aggravated character, and he, having quarrelled with Schapper, Moll, and others, left London. His closest supporter, Hermann Krieger, had already moved to America before that. Whiteling's departure from London meant his complete defeat, which the London members of the Union of the Just did not consider necessary to hide. On January 14, 1846, at the suggestion of Schapper, it was decided to stop further discussion on the questions posed by Whiteling and instead to begin a discussion of Feuerbach's religion of the future and those scientific questions that may be posed by members of the Society. 1. The acceptance of this proposal meant a complete break with Whiteling. The whole year 1846 passes for the Society under the sign of the study of the philosophical views of Ludwig Feuerbach, of which Schapper, Bauer and other leaders of the Union of the Just now became ardent supporters. The study of the philosophy of Feuerbach, who was an idealist in matters of social development, did not lead the members of the Society to a new, revolutionary worldview. On the contrary, the leaders of the Society increasingly fell under the influence of German petty bourgeois true socialism, the philosophical basis of which was the idealistic, religious and ethical views of Ludwig Feuerbach. At meetings of the Educational Society, paragraph by paragraph, Feuerbach's book The Religion of the Future was discussed. At the same time, certain issues of communism were also discussed, which were elucidated from the standpoint of petty bourgeois true socialism. At the same time, the company debated on problems such as, for example, benefits and harms of current intense competition for social progress, the current situation of the workers in England, and so on. 10, who pointed out that in some matters the London figures the Union of the Just was already making a step forward. In May 1846, Marx and Engels appealed to the leaders of the London Educational Society with a proposal to create a Communist Correspondence Committee, and this met with their full approval. In a letter to Marx, Schapper wrote, "I myself could not make up my mind to enter into correspondence with you. Therefore, I gathered several local active communists, read your letter to them and offered to agree with your proposal. At this meeting, it was decided to create a committee here, enter into correspondence with you and with all our might support you in your endeavors. A common organization among the communists of all countries is so necessary that every real communist will be glad to help it." The incorporation of the London Society, which had well-known organizational ties, was of great importance for Marx and Engels. The leaders of the Union did not confine themselves to the creation of a correspondent committee in London alone. They strove to organize these committees wherever there were communes of the Union.